Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here, Portland VegFest. This is my second time in Portland. First time I was here to meet somebody I met on Veggie Connection. He ended up moving to Minneapolis to live with me. We had a torrid love affair that lasted a few weeks, and then he moved back. So that's my connection to Portland. So this is bringing back all sorts of memories being here this weekend. So I am thrilled to be here, actually, and I appreciate that announcement about not taking photos during the cooking demo, because sometimes they end up looking like this. So I'm happy to take photos with you after the demo. Actually, my publisher, Bob, will be outside with me and will be selling copies of my cookbook, and I'll be signing them. Happy to answer your questions, take photos if you like. So meet me out there after the demo, for sure. And yes, this is my cookbook, Mistress Ginger Cooks, Everyday Vegan Food for Everyone. And that's what I made it in mind for, is everyone and everyday food. So staples that you can count on, things that become part of your everyday cuisine. And they're really part of my everyday cuisine. That's how I came up with this cookbook. I said, I needed something to fuel myself as a showgirl, doing high kicks and musical licks all day long. And so I started thinking more about what I was eating, where it was coming from, how much stamina and energy it would give me, but also the effects that it has on the rest of the world, on animals and the planet as well. So then I just naturally moved towards a plant-based diet. And this was in 2002, when there were fewer options out there, but there were a good many, enough to get started. And then I just explored, cultivated my own recipes over the years. And of course, with that, all my many lovers would come to me and say, Mistress Ginger, can you teach me your ways? Can you take me grocery shopping? Can you show me what to do with a red bell pepper, because I haven't a clue? And so this kept me very busy, taking all these people grocery shopping. So I thought, why not just write a cookbook, and then I could just keep a few dozen copies by my nightstand, and just, just give them out willy-nilly. And that's what I do. But I've also been able to give them to all of you, to the masses. Okay, moving on. So today I thought, I not only wanted to show you some delicious recipes, but I wanted to make sure they're simple, things that aren't too daunting. Even if you're new to being in the kitchen and cooking, even if you're used to grabbing your dinner at the local Pump and Munch gas station, I wanted stuff that was something that you could get into your kitchen and have a good time. You could have fun making the food. It could become a staple, something that you could easily make. So that's number one. Number two, I wanted to give you a collection of recipes that together make a really nice meal, because I think that's important too. It's not just having, oh my gosh, this great vegan mac and cheese recipe, but what do you eat with it to make sort of a balanced dish that's not only nutritious, but it's also satisfying, because it's balanced, and it makes for a gorgeous meal, something you can have for your dinner dates, your many dinner dates. So here are a few recipes. We're going to get started, and because I can't literally cook on the stage here because of some fire regulations, I'm going to be doing a little pantomime. But you can imagine. So I've got some vegetable oil. Take any kind of neutral vegetable oil. You'll put 1.5 tablespoons. I thought that was the fire alarm already. I'm so hot. Okay, 1.5 tablespoons of oil. Bring it to warm over medium heat. What we're going to be making right now, maybe I should tell you that, is called Tofu Gone Wild. Okay, here we go. Flavor-packed tofu and no marinating required? It can't be. Oh yes, it can, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Who's got the time for marinating? Not I. Not after a long day of whirling, twirling, and general showgirling. I'm sure you can relate. Don't you just feel like a runaway disco ball on the dance floor of life? And don't you just come home after a long day at the Jamboree wanting a one-way ticket to tasty tofu that you can throw on a threesome salad into peanut pea pasta or alongside some simple grains and greens? I thought so. Now permit me to teach you how to infuse bland cubes of tofu with wowza flavor in an instant. Hold on to your bobby pins, boys and girls, because this tofu has gone wild. Yes. So, this is one of my favorite ways to prepare tofu. How many of you are familiar with tofu? Okay. How many of you like tofu? How many of you had a bad experience with tofu once and it sort of traumatized you and now you can't look at tofu without thinking, ah? Well, I'm here to change all that for you because it has a lot to do with how it's prepared. If you have tofu that's not seasoned properly, or isn't really well cooked, it doesn't have any, bite to it, it's not going to maybe be as satisfying as it could be. Because the wonder of tofu is that it can absorb flavors. It can absorb whatever flavors you throw at it. And this tofu dish we're making is more of a savory, spicy seasoning, but no marinating required. So you don't have to plan ahead. I don't know about you, but I can't plan ahead when it comes to my meals. I just want to have it there, ready to go. So that's what we're going to do. I really, for something like this, where you're going to end up stir-frying tofu and tossing it in a pan, and you want it to hold its little cube shape, I use a super firm or an extra firm tofu. So something that's more dense, it's not going to just fall apart when you start mixing it around. My favorite brand, Wildwood. Super firm, it's quite dense. There's not a lot of water in it, so you don't have to do a lot of squeezing, there's not a lot of preparation. Sometimes people will freeze their tofu in advance to give it a chewier flavor after it's thawed. This, I don't even feel like I have to do that. I can just have it as is. So I cube it. I took 10 ounces here. The recipe says a pound. That's sort of a general. A lot of tofu is sold in a pound or close to it. This is 10 ounces because it's so dense. I think it works just as well as a pound. And I've warmed 1.5 tablespoons of vegetable oil over medium-high heat. Once that's warm, you're going to put your tofu cubes in there. These have already been browned, which is why they're already brown. It's a miracle. And so I would do this, and I would take this, and I'd go like this, and I'd go like that for a while. And meanwhile, I might make my little seasoning sauce. But before we do that, because I'm going to leave you in suspense here. We're going to pretend like that's cooking, and we're going to move on to our dressing. Because a lot of times putting a meal together, a big part of it is sort of multitasking and knowing, okay, you got that going, you can go over there and toss it around every couple minutes, and meanwhile you work on something else. So maybe you want some greens with your dish. I recommend having some kind of green something at least twice a day, with something with lunch, something with dinner, adds a nice dimension to each meal. So what I've done, and how I'm serving this in your samples coming up, you go ahead and, he wants me to raise this up. Oh, not that one, this one. I've got multiple electrical appliances attached to me right now. Is that better? Is that better? Can you hear me? Okay. So we've got a food processor, always a handy contraption to have in your kitchen. I'd recommend investing in one. They don't have to be too pricey to get the job done. Now I've taken we're going to make some Mistress Ginger Dressing now. Okay, here we go. Mistress Ginger Dressing. A recipe named explicitly after me. Aren't you thrilled? From the title alone, you can guess that this salad dressing must be flawless and lawless, just like its audacious namesake. Pour this ginger maple mustard dressing over your favorite vegetable salad or use it as a dip for fresh veggies. What more could you possibly want? Oh, I know, a recipe for Mistress Ginger undressing. But that will be available to just a select few after the demo. So here we've got the food processor, and I've crumbled some silken tofu. You'll find this usually in the specialty food section of your natural food market where they have the Asian food and whatnot. It's silken tofu. It's on the shelf. And half cup of that, crumbled. And this couldn't be simpler. It's just measuring out smaller ingredients and mixing them together. So I'm going to move over here. I'm going to take a 1/4 cup of olive oil. And add that to our silken tofu. We're going to take 2 tablespoons cider vinegar, which I do not see here, but we're going to pretend. You're going to get it. You're going to get it in the samples. Don't worry. You're going to get it in the samples. Nobody's going to eat this right now. So we can add it later. So 2 tablespoons cider vinegar. We did that. Then, where am I? 2 teaspoons maple syrup. And you could go ahead and serve this one. This is the Mistress Ginger Dressing. So 2 teaspoons of maple syrup. So it's got the sweetness along with the tang from the cider vinegar. A teaspoon of Dijon mustard. And 1/4 teaspoon ground ginger. Of course, that's what makes it so special. It's got ginger in it. Now, though my cookbook is called Mistress Ginger Cooks, it doesn't feature that many ginger recipes. I get that question sometimes. Is it all ginger? No, it's not. I'm all ginger all the time. So,
Can you use fresh ginger?
You know, I wouldn't for this, because you want it to really blend up and the flavor to just mix and incorporate. For something like this, I'd use the ground ginger. Similarly, with the tofu, we're going to use onion powder and garlic powder just for the same reason, so that they mix in and incorporate fully. Okay, I've never used this particular contraption. Huh? Oh, it is? This is the soy sauce. I know. We're going to pretend, though, it's in there. And you're going to get samples. That's some kale with a little of this dressing on it. So then you're just going to blend that up. And this is the fun part where you get to see it all blend up together. So the great thing about this silken tofu is that it will blend up into a real nice creamy sauce. So if you are someone, like many of us, who loves a creamy sauce, maybe you're used to a lot of dairy products, maybe you grew up with some dairy products and you want that mouth feel and that creamy texture, this is a good product to use. How many of you have worked with this before, silken tofu? I'd like to hear, just shout out some things you've used it for. Pie? Pudding. What's that? A chipotle dip. That's a great idea. Anything else? Like pumpkin pie, people have said, yeah. Smoothies. You can throw it in a smoothie, a little protein boost. What's that? A cheese spread. That's great. Yeah. What's that? Pudding and cheesecake. I have a recipe for, it's called coconutty ginger cheesecake in here. And it's made using an actual cream cheese, a vegan cream cheese, made partly with cashews, partly with coconut oil, and partly with a little bit of this. So I also really enjoy it for that. Okay, so after a few minutes, that should be well incorporated. And I would scrape down the sides of the bowl there and make sure you've got it all mixed up together. So basically, you're getting the little samples. How's it going? A little tasty? I would say, I have in my cookbook, I usually say, I would say about a week. I'd use it within a week, just as long as it would say to use this once it's been opened, which I don't know. I would say a week. Yeah. Okay, so this, look, it's beautifully brown now. What an amazing thing. Look at that. Beautiful. Now it's not only brown, but it's got this little crispy texture, which is nice. I'm going to touch it because, nobody's going to eat it right now. You're going to get samples that were not touched by my hands. So we're going to make our seasoning. Once that's getting browned, we are going to do some soy sauce. This is Bragg's Liquid Aminos, which I often use. My cookbook, the recipe says reduced sodium. That's an option too if you want to go for a little reduced sodium. So we're going to do 1.5 tablespoons. Again, this is very simple. It's just mixing up a few basic ingredients. That's the essence of it. Make sure I get my amounts right here. So as I said before, onion powder, garlic powder, very good if you want the flavors to mix around and incorporate. I adore the real deal. In fresh soups and things, I love throwing as much garlic in as I can possibly get. And ginger, I have a miso sexy soup that I would highly recommend. It's a great alternative to the chicken soup, when people say you've got a cold. I wanted to make a vegan version of that with very healthy ingredients, and that is one I would recommend. So you're going to add to this teaspoon onion powder, half teaspoon garlic powder. I can figure out where I'm at. Oh, that was a half teaspoon, so we're going to add another one of those. Then half teaspoon garlic powder. Quarter teaspoon ground paprika. This one. 1/8 teaspoon dried thyme. I love thyme. Wish I had more of it. Now with this, because it's these larger pieces, I tend to either crumble them in my hand or use a little mortar and pestle so it gets quite fine. And again, it moves around the tofu a little bit better. And then ground black pepper over here. I'm going to do a half teaspoon of that. Oops, we'll take off the little lid. This is not wanting to I can do this. Okay, got it. Half teaspoon. Very simple. I mix that up. I like to use a little wire whisk. You could use a fork. Oops. Then I'll usually take rubber spatula. Love a rubber spatula, very useful. And it's cooking, it's sizzling, it's just browned, it's still cooking. Look at that sizzle, pop, sizzle, pop. You put this in, a little smoke's gonna start to come up just a little bit. You can put on your oven sauce. And then we'll just mix that as it cooks. So it's still cooking at the same temperature, medium high, just a little more than medium. And you toss it until the liquid from the seasoning sauce evaporates. And just until then, you could even go a little further and blacken it a little bit if you like that kind of thing. Go until it's golden brown. So you can serve the Tofu Gone Wild now. And so you see, and we'll talk about the flavors after you've tried it, okay? We'll come back to that, but I hope you love this one. This one's definitely a staple for me. What are some of your favorite things to do with tofu? Favorite ways to prepare them?
Pad thai.
Oh, a pad thai, yeah. Throwing it in something like that.
Tofu loaf.
A tofu loaf.
Yeah, like a meatloaf.
Oh, like a meatloaf. Great. What's that? Oh, tofu stroganoff. Sounds good. All these ideas. There's a million things you could do. Tomorrow's demo, I'm making a tofu scramble. A lot like an egg scrambled, but no eggs. Very convenient. So, you're getting the tofu gone wild. And now we have to move on to one of my favorites, dessert. Who doesn't love dessert? So, my Chakra Chip Cookies. I am convinced that chocolate chip cookies were put here on earth to uplift and inspire us all so that we may reach new heights of consciousness. They have always been my go-to dessert, which probably explains why I'm such an exceptionally evolved soul. Since I eat chocolate chips so often, I wanted to develop my own recipe for the classic cookie that would be simple and wholesome, but still capable of setting my metaphysical energy centers ablaze. These Chakra Chip cookies pass the test with flying colors. They satisfy the sweet tooth and might even inspire world peace. I wish. Well, if nothing else, they inspire my inner peace, even if just for a moment. We can use more world peace, can't we? So, let's look at our basic baking 101. To get this going, I want to make sure my coconut oil is prepared. Now, oftentimes coconut oil, unless you're living in the tropics and you don't have air conditioning, it will look like this in your cupboard. And it will be, stiff, and that will be difficult to work with. So I don't have a microwave. You could probably pop it in the microwave for a few seconds. Otherwise, on a stove on low heat, in a small saucepan, 1/4 cup coconut oil. You want to have that prepared. Then I've prepared my dry ingredients here, and that includes 1 cup of whole wheat pastry flour. You could use unbleached white flour. I use the whole wheat pastry just to get a little more healthy, fiber, whole grain flour going there. 1 1/4 teaspoons baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon baking soda, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and I've mixed those up. And I often mix my dry ingredients also with a wire whisk. Then, set that aside. You're going to move on to your wet ingredients. Sometimes I just mix these in the saucepan where I was melting my coconut oil. We're going to put it in a bowl today. You want to make sure the coconut oil's closer to room temperature now, otherwise it's going to melt your chocolate chips, which you don't want to have happen. So with that, you're going to add 1/4 cup firmly packed brown sugar. This is got a little olive oil in it, but it really doesn't matter. We're going to pretend like that's not there. And we're going to add 1/4 cup of maple syrup. I love maple syrup and brown sugar, and I think that's one of the secrets to this recipe, why you don't need a formal egg replacer. Eggs are often used in baking for binding, and so this is a great recipe when you don't have an egg replacer per se. How many of you are familiar with different kinds of vegan egg replacers? Yes? So there's various things. There's tofu can work as an egg replacer if it's whipped up into your batter. Flax seeds ground and whipped up with water can help with binding. Bananas. Also, there's an actual packaged egg replacer, a starchy compound that works as well. I use all those things in my cookbook as egg replacers, but this is one example of a recipe that has none of those, but I believe it's the maple syrup and the brown sugar just has enough stick to hold things together. So I'm going to mix that up also with our vanilla. We want to do 1 1/4 teaspoons of vanilla extract, but I've used all my measuring spoons, so I'm just going to use this. Mix that up in there. So there we are, and we're going to mix this into our dry ingredients. Have you had the Tofu Gone Wild? Did you go wild? Good. That's the goal. Good. Well, I'm glad you like that. What did it remind you of? Did it remind you of anything? What's that? chicken. It reminds me a little bit of like fried chicken flavor. You know, it's kind of gross to think about if you haven't had chicken in a while. Who wants that? But, you know, but those flavors, it's not that we don't still have a nostalgia for the flavors that we grew up eating, and we love the texture, we love the spice, we love all those dimensions, and I find that, I think of that. It's been a long time. So you want to mix it until you just get all your dry ingredients moistened. And then you want to add in your 1/4 cup heaping of semi-sweet chocolate chips. I use semi-sweet. Want to make sure they're fair trade. How many of you knew that chocolate is vegan? How many of you wondered if it was? Yeah, okay. I get that question a lot. People are kind of surprised. Chocolate's vegan? They're so used to milk chocolate and dairy being in there, but it's not necessary. It's not necessary. And you can even find some more everyday brands that don't have dairy in them. So basically, there you go. You fold in your chocolate chips, and then you'll form them into small balls. And the size is really up to you. I mean, this could be a dozen cookies. It could be 2 dozen cookies. It could be 40 cookies, which is what I did to make your samples of the cookies. So, no offense. No, but it's actually, I like them when they're smaller, you know, because then you can eat more of them without eating more of them. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm going to have 5 cookies. And it's only like having 2. It's great. So you are welcome to pass out the cookies when you get a chance. You're going to bake that. We would have preheated the oven at 350, and you bake it for just around 11 minutes. I'd say that's the top. Depending on your oven, you might want to play with that timing a little bit. And then you let that cool. And you try not to eat it too soon out of the oven, but it is awfully good fresh out of the oven. So that, Mistress Ginger Dressing, Tofu Gone Wild, Chakra Chip Cookies, that's what I have to share with you. Recipe today. Thank you. Thank you. And we've got some time. So I am happy to answer your questions, whatever questions you might have about vegan cookery, my many lovers, whatever. No, maybe later. Okay, yes.
I'm curious about the kinds of oils you choose for cooking. I mean, there's so many now. I mean, they got avocado oil, they got coconut oil. Why choose what you do?
Yes, good question. Extra virgin olive oil, as opposed to just regular olive oil, not extra virgin, is extra virgin's good for raw salad dressings. The flavor's a little more refined, so I would use it for something like this or some other dressing. I kind of use extra virgin for everything, but that would be a deciding factor if you were like, oh, which should I do? Should I do this or that? Extra virgin if you're going to be tasting the... Yes. So there's that, and I use it for more savory dishes, and if I'm making like a savory soup or something, I'm going to brown the veggies first or something, I would use that. Something where I want to add a little flavor. Vegetable oil, I use canola oil. Some people are, there's some environmental issues with canola oil and some other oils, so you might want to think about that. There's also safflower oil, grapeseed oil. There's a lot of different neutral tasting vegetable oils that you could consider using, and I encourage you to do that. Also, there's different, this one's for high heat. Canola oil is a great one for high heat cooking because it doesn't change its as much. When you cook some oils, it kind of changes the nutritional quality of it. So I would recommend, like if I'm going to make a stir fry, I use coconut oil usually if I'm cooking something at high heat. I really like coconut oil. I've been using it more and more. I try to get it into my baked goods. Adds a nice, it has the saturated fat that that they told us was not good for us, but then they said it was good, and then they said it wasn't good, and then they said it was good. So whatever. The point is, it tastes good, and it can be cooked at high heats. So I use it frequently for baking, and it has a fairly neutral flavor. I don't taste the coconut too much, but you might in the cookies a little bit. So it varies depending on what you're using it for. What else can I say? Does that answer your question?
Very good.
Okay, good, thank you. Yes?
Maybe I didn't hear you when you already said it, but all the recipes are in your cookbook, right?
All of these are in my cookbook, Mistress Ginger Cooks, Everyday Vegan Food for Everyone.
I enjoy every one of them. And
Great.
question, how many times do you have to make a recipe before you'll expect that it well enough?
That's a great question. You know, it depends on the recipe. It depends how new the recipe is to me. Like many of these recipes, as I said, this is my first cookbook. So I was putting in a lot of things that I've just been making for years and kind of over time have developed. And so it's hard to say for those. But then once I set the cookbook down, I knew pretty much what I wanted to do. Those didn't take as much time. Then I'm like, well, I need to fill out this chapter with a few more recipes. I want to veganize my mother's strawberry shortcake, and I need to make a vegan pound cake to do that. So that takes some trial and error, and some are more extensive in that way, and it takes a lot of time, and then some are simpler to practice over time. So it really depends. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm trying to keep the fat content down. Do you have any kind of a substitute for oils? Like for the dressing?
Sure. You know, you could experiment with just omitting the olive oil altogether. I think it would still be creamy with the soy, with the tofu as it is. It might not be as sort of runny, drippy to dress a salad or something. So in that case, it might add a little water. I might try that. You could boost some of the other flavor agents in case it seems to water down the flavor. You could boost a little of the ginger or the maple syrup. Or, you could play with that. Yeah. And of course, in baked goods, another good egg replacer that often takes the place of a more of a fatty thing like an oil would be applesauce. That's used in a lot of baked goods to kind of keep the fat down, but keep it moist at the same time. Yeah. Yes?
Do you typically use volumetric measurements and not weight measurements, or do you use both?
I only use volumetric measurements, but I dated someone who used the weight measurements exclusively, and we were just incompatible. That was it. True story. Okay. Anything else? I'm here to answer. I'm here with the secrets of the universe. Shall I tell you about some more of my recipes? Well, let me tell you about the lay of the land of my cookbook, because this is I really geared this in mind towards people who haven't had a lot of experience with being in the kitchen, period, or with vegan cooking. And then there are a few recipes like a Slovakian pastry, or the pound cake that I mentioned, or this barbarian tort that are a little more extensive. Just take a gander. Yeah, this is one of my pièces de résistance. I veganized my mother's Bavarian tort to do that. And to do that, it had this amazing creamy icing that was basically, she would make it with heavy whipping cream and cream cheese and brown sugar. That was it. And I just used non-dairy cream cheese, like the Tofuti brand, or there's a brand you could make your own. I used a coconut cream for the heavy whipping cream. So if you put a can of coconut, full-fat coconut milk in the fridge, the cream will rise to the top. Then you scoop that cream out. You whip it with electric beaters until it fluffs up a bit. It won't get as fluffy as heavy whipping cream, the dairy version, but it'll get there. And so that's what I use. And then I fold in that and the brown sugar and makes a really nice, creamy, rich dressing. Not for the low-fat minded chef. So there's that. So gearing it towards those different groups. I have a glossary of freaky vegan specialty foods that will tell you what you may have heard about that you are afraid of. For instance, hemp seeds, or nutritional yeast, or quinoa. So things that you maybe have heard about, you don't quite even know how to pronounce. It's all in here. So there's that. Also have my 10 tips for meal planning, which I'll just give. Whoops. Everything's okay. I'll just give you the basic. Number 1, enjoy yourself. Number 2, enjoy your leftovers. Number 3, have an easy breakfast. Number 4, eat your greens, beans, and grains. Number 5, fat is your friend. Number 6, listen to your body because every body is different. Number 7, where do you get your protein? Number 8, eat both raw and cooked fruits and vegetables. Number 9, bring a snack. Number 10, know that you're not alone. So, and I go into depth about each one of those little tips in the book. So it's really geared towards people who might be new to that. There's a list of staples in my pantry, because everybody wants to know what's in my pantry. And useful appliances and utensils. And then the last one, again, I really find meal planning, creating a balanced meal important. So there's a few examples. Meals to fuel your fantasies. Old World Feast, Scandalous Schmooze Fest, The Morning After. All these are different examples where you might want a nice combination of recipes to make a wonderful meal. So that's all in there. And of course, the photographs. So there's breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert, and more. So you'll have to check it out. Again, I'll be outside. If there's no further questions, we'll just wrap it up here, and I'd love to meet you outside if you're interested. Thank you all so much for coming. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.